The morning sun was already burning hot when Maria Santos walked slowly down the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge. Her 6-year-old daughter Sofia held tight to her hand, while 4-year-old Miguel dragged his feet behind them. Maria's belly was round and heavy, 7 months pregnant with her third child. The town was small, just a few hundred people living in the middle of nowhere. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and everyone knew Maria's story. 6 months ago, her husband Carlos had packed his truck and driven away, leaving nothing but a note saying he couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. Maria stopped in front of the old church, the only building in town that offered any shade. The wooden steps were worn smooth by years of people sitting there. She lowered herself down carefully, one hand supporting her back. Sofia and Miguel sat beside her, quiet as always when they were in town. "Mama, I'm hungry," Miguel whispered. His voice so soft only she could hear. Maria's heart broke a little more. She had exactly $3 in her pocket and a half-empty jar of peanut butter at home. That was it. Yesterday, she had walked to every business on Main Street asking for work. The grocery store owner looked at her belly and shook his head. The diner manager said they couldn't hire someone who might need time off. Even the gas station attendant turned her away. Mrs. Peterson walked by with her shopping bags, stepping wide around them like poverty might be catching. She had been Maria's neighbor for 2 years, but now she acted like Maria was invisible. The woman hurried past without even looking at the children. "Why don't people like us anymore?" Sofia asked, her big brown eyes full of confusion. Maria pulled her daughter closer. How could she explain that some people thought a woman alone with children was somehow broken? That they whispered she must have done something wrong to make her husband leave? The truth was simple. Carlos was young and scared, and when things got hard, he ran. But the town had already decided the story, and Maria was the villain. A group of teenagers walked by, laughing and talking loud. One of them pointed at Maria and said something that made the others laugh harder. Maria felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she kept her eyes down. Fighting back would only make things worse. The church bell rang 11 times. Maria knew she should look for work again, but her feet hurt and her back ached. Moving was getting harder every day. The baby inside her seemed to be growing bigger by the hour. "Can we go home?" Miguel asked. Home was a tiny room behind the laundromat that Mrs. Chun let them use in exchange for cleaning. It wasn't much, just 4 walls, a hot plate, and a mattress on the floor. But it was better than sleeping in the truck, which is what they had done for 2 weeks after Carlos left. Maria stood up slowly, holding Sofia's hand to steady herself. As they walked toward the laundromat, she could feel eyes watching them from behind windows and screen doors. The whole town was watching her fail, waiting to see what would happen when the baby came. At night, when the children were asleep, Maria would lie awake making plans. She had been a nurse before Sofia was born, but her license had expired. Getting it back would take time and money she didn't have. She could try to find work in the bigger town 50 miles away, but her truck was already making strange noises and she couldn't afford to fix it. Sometimes she thought about calling her sister in California. Rosa had a good job and a nice house, but Rosa had also told Maria not to marry Carlos in the first place. The last thing Maria wanted was to hear, "I told you so," while begging for help. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the shame. It was watching her children change. Sofia used to be full of questions and laughter. Now she was quiet and careful, like she was afraid of taking up too much space. Miguel had stopped playing with his toy cars because he could see how much Maria worried about everything. They deserved better. They deserved a father who wouldn't abandon them. They deserved a mother who could buy them new shoes when they're old. One's got holes. They deserved to feel safe and wanted, not like burdens nobody wanted to carry, but Maria didn't know how to give them any of those things. Every door in town seemed closed to them. Every opportunity slipped away because she was the wrong kind of person now, a single mother with 2. Many problems and not enough solutions. As she helped Miguel wash his hands at the laundromat sink, Maria made the same promise she made every day: tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow she would find a way to change their story. She had to believe that because the alternative was too frightening to think about. Outside, the desert stretched in every direction, endless and unforgiving. But somewhere out there was a better life for her children. She just had to figure out how to reach it. The weekly market in Cedar Ridge wasn't much to look at. A few tables set up in the parking lot behind the post office, selling vegetables from local gardens and crafts that tourists sometimes bought. Maria usually avoided market days because she couldn't afford to buy anything, and watching other families shop together made her feel worse. But Sophia had been asking about the pretty things she saw through the window, and Maria thought maybe they could just look. Sometimes looking was enough to make the children smile. That's when she first saw him. The man was tall and lean, with long black hair pulled back and skin weathered by sun and wind. His table was different from the others. Instead of vegetables or cheap souvenirs, it was covered with beautiful silver jewelry and pottery painted in rich colors. Everything looked like it had been made by someone who truly cared about their craft. Joseph Crowfeather had driven 4 hours from the reservation to sell his work. He made jewelry the way his grandfather had taught him, and pottery using clay from the sacred places of his people. Most weeks, the market barely paid for his gas, but he kept coming because it gave him something to do. With his hands and his time, he noticed the pregnant woman and her children right away. They stood at the edge of the market, watching but not participating. The little girl kept looking at his jewelry table, her eyes wide with wonder. The boy stayed close to his mother, his small hand gripping her dress. Joseph had learned to read people's faces during his years of grief. These three carried the same weight he knew too well, the look of people who had lost something important and didn't know how to get it back. When the little girl finally worked up the courage to approach his table, Joseph smiled gently. She was maybe 6 years old, with dark hair and messy braids and a dress that was too small for her growing body. "That one's pretty," she said, pointing to a silver bracelet with turquoise stones. "My grandmother would have liked you," Joseph said. "She always said children have the best eye for beauty." Sophia beamed at the compliment. It had been a long time since anyone had said something nice about her. "How much does it cost?" she asked, though she probably knew her mother couldn't buy. Well, this particular bracelet is looking for someone special to wear it," Joseph said seriously. "Someone who would take good care of it and appreciate its story." Sophia nodded solemnly. "I would take really good care of it." Joseph glanced over at Maria, who was watching nervously from a few feet away. He could see the pride and worry fighting in her face, wanting to let her daughter dream, but knowing dreams could hurt when they couldn't come true. "Tell you what," Joseph said, pretending to think hard about it. "This bracelet has been with me for 3 market days now. I think it's ready to find its new home. But first, I need to make sure you're the right person for it." Sophia's eyes got even wider. "How do you know?" "Well, can you make a promise to take care of something precious?" "Yes, sir." "And do you help your mama when she needs it?" "I try to. That's what I thought." Joseph carefully lifted the bracelet from the table. "This bracelet was made by my great-aunt. She always said that beautiful things should belong to beautiful people. I think she would want you to have it." Before Sophia could respond, Joseph gently fastened the bracelet around her thin wrist. It was a little big, but it caught the light and made her smile in a way that transformed her whole face. "But sir, we can't pay," Maria started to say, stepping forward. Joseph held up a gentle hand. "In my culture, we believe that gifts should flow freely when they're meant to be given. This bracelet chose your daughter. Who am I to argue with that?" Maria felt tears starting in her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her children kindness without expecting something in return. "What do you say, Sophia?" Maria whispered. "Thank you," Sophia said, admiring the way the silver caught the sunlight. "Thank you so much," Joseph winked at her. "You're very welcome." As the day went on, Joseph found himself watching the small family. They stayed at the market longer than most people, letting the children look at everything even though they weren't buying. The little boy, Miguel, was fascinated by a clay pot painted with running horses. Near closing time, Joseph made a decision. He walked over to where Maria was helping Sophia and Miguel pick up some coins that had fallen from a fountain. Your son seems to like horses, he said. Maria looked up, surprised. Miguel loves anything with animals. He wants to be a cowboy when he grows up. Joseph smiled. I have something that might interest him. He returned with the painted pot Miguel had been admiring. This piece isn't selling today. Would you mind if I gave it to him? It would make me happy to know it's with someone who appreciates it. Miguel's face lit up like Christmas morning. He hugged the pot carefully against his chest. Why are you being so nice to us? Maria asked quietly. Joseph was quiet for a moment. Because kindness matters, he said finally. And because children should know that the world has good people in it. As they walked away, Sophia wearing her bracelet and Miguel carrying his pot, Joseph felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. For just a few hours his grief had lifted. Helping this family had reminded him that there was still goodness worth fighting for in the world. He didn't know yet that this meeting would change all of their lives forever. 3 weeks after the market, Miguel woke up burning with fever. Maria felt his forehead and knew immediately that this wasn't just a cold. His skin was hot to the touch, and he was shivering even though the small room was warm. Mama, my head hurts, Miguel whispered, his voice weak and scratchy. Maria's heart raced. She had some children's medicine, but it was old and almost empty. The nearest doctor was Dr. Williams, and his office visits cost $60, money she simply didn't have. Sophia sat up on the mattress they all shared. Is Miguel sick? He's going to be okay, Maria said, trying to sound confident. But inside she was terrified. What if it was something serious? What if Miguel needed medicine she couldn't afford? She spent the morning trying home remedies. Cool claws on his forehead, sips of water, anything she could think of. But Miguel kept getting worse. By noon he was barely responding when she called his name. Maria made the hardest decision of her life. She would have to take Miguel to Dr. Williams and figure out how to pay later. Maybe she could work off the debt somehow. She was getting ready to carry Miguel to the truck when someone knocked on the door. Maria opened it to find Joseph Crow, Feather standing there with a concerned expression. I hope you don't mind me stopping by, he said. I was in town selling some pieces to the general store, and Mrs. Chun mentioned that Miguel was sick. Maria was so surprised she could barely speak. You came to check on us? May I see him? Maria hesitated, then stepped aside. Joseph knelt beside the mattress where Miguel lay curled up under a thin blanket. He gently touched the boy's forehead, and his expression grew serious. This fever is too high, he said quietly. He needs to see a doctor right away. I know, Maria said, her voice breaking. I was just getting ready to take him, but I don't have the money for let me drive. You? Joseph interrupted. My truck is more reliable than yours, and we need to get him there quickly. During the ride to Dr. Williams' office, Miguel lay across Maria's lap, barely conscious. Joseph drove carefully but fast, and Maria found herself grateful for his calm presence. At the doctor's office, the receptionist looked at Maria with barely hidden disapproval. Do you have insurance or payment today? Before Maria could answer, Joseph stepped forward. I'll be taking care of the bill, he said quietly, pulling out his wallet. Maria stared at him in shock. You can't do that. You barely know us. Let's worry about Miguel first, Joseph said. Everything else can wait. Dr. Williams examined Miguel thoroughly while Maria held her breath. Finally, the older man turned to them with a reassuring smile. It's a bacterial infection, he said. Pretty common in children this age. The good news is that it responds well to antibiotics. The bad news is that if you had waited much longer, it could have become dangerous. Joseph paid for the medicine without hesitation, and they drove to the pharmacy to fill the prescription. By evening, Miguel was already starting to feel better, and Maria was overwhelmed with gratitude and confusion. Why did you do that? She asked Joseph as they sat outside the laundromat, watching Sophia and Miguel play with some stones they had. Painted to look like animals. Joseph was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, I lost my wife and baby son in a car accident, he said finally. They were coming home from the hospital after a routine checkup when a drunk driver hit them. Maria felt her breath catch. I'm so sorry. For a long time, I couldn't see any point in anything. I stopped making jewelry, stopped caring about my land, stopped caring about much of anything. He watched Miguel laugh as Sophia made her painted stone horse gallop around. But watching your children today, seeing how much you love them, it reminded me of something important. What's that? That life is precious, that children are gifts, and that when you have the power to help someone, especially a child, you should do it. He turned to look at Maria. My culture teaches that children belong to the whole community, not just their parents. Miguel getting better today. It feels like the first good thing I've been part of in years. Maria wiped away tears she didn't realize had started falling. You saved his life today. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to repay me, but maybe I could keep checking on you all. Not because you need charity, but because being around your family makes me remember who I used to be. Over the next few weeks, Joseph became a regular presence in their lives. He would stop by after selling his crafts, always bringing something small, fresh bread from the reservation, a wooden toy he had carved, or just stories that made the children laugh. Maria found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. Joseph was different from any man she had known. He listened when she talked, played patiently with her children, and never made her feel like she was a burden or a charity case. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the steps behind the laundromat, Joseph told her more about his life on the reservation. I have a house there, he said. It's not fancy, but it's got 3 bedrooms and a big kitchen. There's land around it where children could run and play safely. The community there judges people by their character, not their circumstances. Maria felt something stir in her chest, a feeling she thought she had lost forever. It sounds wonderful, she said softly. It could be, Joseph replied, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For the right family? Neither of them said anything more that night, but both of them were thinking about possibilities they hadn't dared to imagine before. As autumn arrived in Cedar Ridge, Joseph's visits became the highlight of Sophia and Miguel's week. Every Tuesday and Friday, his truck would pull up behind the laundromat, and the children would run to greet him like he was their favorite uncle. Joseph had a gift for making ordinary moments feel special. He taught Sophia how to braid leather strips into patterns that told stories. He showed Miguel how to whittle simple shapes from soft wood, always making sure the boy's small hands stayed safe. When they asked about his people, he shared Apache, legends about clever coyotes and brave warriors, his voice bringing the characters to life. Maria watched these interactions with a mixture of wonder and caution. Part of her was amazed at how naturally Joseph connected with her children, but another part was terrified of letting them get too attached. Good things in her life had a way of disappearing. Tell us about the horses again, Miguel would beg, and Joseph would describe the wild mustangs that roamed near his home on the reservation. Maybe someday you'll see them for yourself, Joseph would say, and Miguel's eyes would light up with dreams too big for their small room. Sophia was learning to make simple jewelry using techniques Joseph showed her. Her childish attempts at silverwork were clumsy, but Joseph praised every crooked wire and uneven bead like she was creating masterpieces. You have good hands for this work, he told her one afternoon as she struggled with a particularly difficult knot. In my family, we believe that creativity is a gift passed down through generations. But I'm not from your family, Sophia said, concentrating hard on her work. Joseph smiled gently. Family isn't always about blood, little one. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to care for each other. Maria felt her heart skip when she heard those words. She was 8 months pregnant now, moving slowly and getting tired easily. Joseph had started bringing groceries when he visited, always claiming he had bought too much for himself, and didn't want the food to go to waste. The whole town was starting to notice the Apache man who spent time with the pregnant Outcast and her children. Some people disapproved, whispering that it wasn't proper for a single woman to be accepting help from a man who wasn't her husband. But others began to see the small family differently. Mrs. Chun, who owned the laundromat, started letting Sophia and Miguel help her with small tasks in exchange for quarters they could use for candy. "Those children have good manners," she told Maria. "Someone is raising them right." Even Dr. Williams had softened toward them after Miguel's illness. When he saw Joseph and Maria together at the market, he nodded politely instead of looking through them like before, but it was during the night that changed everything that Joseph truly became part of their lives. Maria woke up at 3 in the morning with sharp pains across her belly. At first, she tried to convince herself it was false labor. The baby wasn't due for another month. But the pains kept coming, stronger and closer together. "Sophia," she whispered urgently, shaking her daughter awake. "I need you to be very brave. Right now." Sophia sat up immediately, alert in the way children become when they sense real danger. "What's wrong, Mama? The baby is coming early. I need you to go next door and ask Mrs. Chun to call the hospital, okay?" But before Sophia could move, another contraction hit Maria so hard she cried out. Miguel woke up crying, scared by the sound that Mrs. Chun appeared at their door in her robe, having heard the commotion through the thin walls. "The hospital is 40 minutes away," she said after calling. "The ambulance will take at least 30 minutes to get here." Maria felt panic rising in her chest. This baby was coming too fast, and she was scared something was wrong. "Call Joseph," she gasped between contractions. "His number is on the paper by the phone." Mrs. Chun looked confused. "The Apache man? But what can he—" "Please," Maria begged. Just call him." Joseph answered on the second ring, instantly alert despite the early hour. When Mrs. Chun explained what was happening, he didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "Keep her calm and comfortable until I arrive." Joseph made the drive from the reservation in record time, his truck flying down the empty desert highway. When he burst through the door of the small room, Maria had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life. "How are you doing?" he asked, kneeling beside her and taking her hand. "Scared," she admitted. "It's too early and the pains are so strong." Joseph squeezed her hand gently. "You're going to be okay. We're going to get you to the hospital and everything is going to be fine." While Mrs. Chin stayed with Sophia and Miguel, Joseph helped Maria to his truck and drove through the night toward the hospital. He talked to her constantly during the ride, his calm voice helping her focus through each contraction. "Breathe with me," he said, "in and out just like that. You're doing great." When they reached the hospital, Joseph carried Maria inside and stayed with her while the nurses got her ready. He held her hand during the difficult labor, never leaving her side even when the doctors told him he should wait outside. Baby Elena was born just as the sun was rising, small but healthy despite being early, when the nurse placed the tiny girl in Maria's arms. Joseph felt tears on his cheeks, the first he had shed since his own family died. "She's beautiful," he whispered, looking down at the baby's peaceful face. "Would you like to hold her?" Maria asked softly. Joseph's hands shook as he took the infant, but Elena settled into his arms like she belonged there. In that moment, surrounded by the smell of new life and possibility, Joseph felt his broken heart begin to heal. For the next 3 days, while Maria recovered in the hospital, Joseph took care of Sophia and Miguel. He slept on the floor of their small room, made them breakfast, and took them to visit their mother and new sister every day. "Is Joseph going to be our daddy now?" Miguel asked one evening as Joseph tucked him into bed. "I don't know," Sophia answered seriously, "but I hope so." Joseph pretended to be asleep, but he heard every word. And for the first time since his wife died, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to have a family again. 2 weeks after Elena's birth, Maria was finally feeling strong enough to walk around the hospital garden. The tiny courtyard wasn't much to look at, just a few benches surrounded by desert plants, but after days in the hospital room, the fresh air felt like freedom. Joseph pushed the wheelchair while Maria carried Elena, with Sophia and Miguel walking beside them. The children were excited to be outside, chattering about everything they saw. Sophia had hardly left her mother's side since the birth, worried that something bad might happen if she wasn't watching. "Look, Mama, there's a hummingbird," Miguel pointed to a tiny green bird hovering near some red flowers. In Apache tradition, hummingbirds bring messages of joy, Joseph said, settling onto a bench beside Maria. Maybe this one is celebrating Elena's arrival. Maria smiled, adjusting the blanket around her sleeping daughter. Elena was so small, barely 5 pounds, but the doctors said she was healthy and would catch up quickly. Still, Maria worried constantly about everything, feeding schedules, breathing patterns, whether she was keeping the baby warm enough. "You're a natural mother," Joseph observed, watching Maria's gentle movements with Elena. "Some people just know how to love without holding back." "I don't feel natural at anything right now," Maria admitted. "I feel lost most of the time." Joseph was quiet for a moment, watching Sofia and Miguel chase each other around the small garden. They looked happy and carefree for the first time since he had met them. The hospital stay had been like a vacation from their uncertain life, regular meals, warm rooms, and no one looking at them with judgment. "Maria," Joseph said finally, his voice more serious than usual, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, suddenly worried. Had she become too dependent on his help? Was he getting tired of their problems? "These past few weeks, taking care of Sofia and Miguel, being here with you and Elena, it's changed something in me." Joseph stared at his hands, choosing his words carefully. "For 3 years I've been living like a ghost, going through the motions but not really alive. But your family has brought me back to life." Maria felt her heart start to beat faster. She wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but she could tell it was important. Joseph stood up and walked a few steps away, then turned back to face her. "I have something to ask you, and I want you to know that I've thought about this very carefully." Sofia and Miguel had stopped playing, and were watching the adults with curious expressions. "Come with me," Joseph said, his voice steady but gentle. "Your children deserve a father." Maria stared at him, not sure she had heard correctly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want to take care of all of you. Not just as a friend who helps sometimes, but as a real family." Joseph sat back, down, leaning forward earnestly. "I have a house on the reservation. It's a good house with enough room for everyone. There's land where the children can play safely and a community that will welcome you." Maria's mind was spinning. "Joseph, we barely know each other. I know that Sofia loves to create beautiful things and that she worries about everyone around her," Joseph said quietly. "I know that Miguel dreams of horses and has the gentlest heart I've ever seen. I know that you would do anything to protect your children, even when you're scared and tired and don't know where to turn." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "And I know that when I hold Elena, I feel like I could protect her from everything bad in the world." "That's not barely knowing each other, Maria. That's knowing what matters." Sofia walked over and stood beside the bench, listening intently. Miguel climbed onto Joseph's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. "But marriage is ... double quote as started to say. "I'm not talking about romance," Joseph interrupted gently. "I'm talking about partnership, about building something good together, about giving these children the stable home they deserve." He took a deep breath. "My people have a saying, we are only as strong as our weakest member. Your family is not weak, Maria, but you've been carrying too much alone. Let me help you carry it." Maria looked down at Elena, who had woken up and was looking around with wide, dark eyes. Her daughter deserved so much more than a single room behind a laundromat. Sofia and Miguel deserved a father who would never abandon them. "What about love?" she asked quietly. Joseph smiled. "Love grows in many different ways. I already love these children like they were my own, and I care about you more than I've cared about anyone since my wife died. Maybe that's enough to start with." Sofia tugged on Maria's sleeve. "Mama, does this mean we could have a real house? With our own rooms? And horses?" Miguel added hopefully from Joseph's lap. Maria felt tears starting in her eyes. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Joseph, you're being incredibly generous, but I can't let you turn your whole life upside down for us." "You wouldn't be turning my life upside down," Joseph said seriously. "You'd be giving it meaning again?" These past few weeks have been the happiest I've been in 3 years. He stood up, still holding Miguel, and extended his free hand to Maria. I'm not asking you to decide right now, but I am asking you to consider it. Your children deserve a father who will never leave them. You deserve a partner who will help you carry the load. And maybe we all deserve a chance at happiness. Maria took his hand and let him help her stand. As they walked slowly back toward the hospital, Elena sleeping in her arms and the older children chattering excitedly about the possibility of horses and their own bedrooms, Maria felt something she had thought was gone forever. Hope, real, genuine hope that maybe their story didn't have to end in struggle and loneliness. Maybe, just maybe, the best chapters were still to come. I need time to think, she said finally. Take all the time you need, Joseph replied. I'll be here either way. But even as she said the words, Maria was already imagining what it would feel like to wake up every morning without wondering where they would sleep that night. She was imagining Sofia and Miguel running through open spaces instead of hiding in small rooms. She was imagining Elena growing up with a father who would teach her. If she was precious and valuable, it sounded like the kind of life she had stopped believing was possible. But standing there in the desert garden with Joseph's strong hand, holding hers and her 3 children surrounding them, it almost seemed real. Maria spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about Joseph's proposal. She would lie in the hospital bed, holding Elena and watching her other children sleep on the small couch, weighing every possible outcome in her mind. The practical part of her knew it made sense. Joseph was offering them safety, stability, and a real home. He was kind to her children and had already proven he would be there when they needed him most. What more could she ask for? But the scared part of her whispered warnings. What if it was too good to be true? What if Joseph changed his mind once he realized how much work it was to raise 3 children? What if she was trading one uncertain situation for another? On the 4th morning, Sofia climbed into bed beside her and Elena. Mama, are we going to live with Joseph? She asked quietly. I don't know yet, baby. What do you think about it? Sofia was quiet for a long moment. I think Joseph would never leave us like Daddy did. The simple confidence in her daughter's voice broke through all of Maria's doubts. Sofia was only 6 years old, but she had excellent instincts about people. If she trusted Joseph, maybe Maria should too. That afternoon, when Joseph came to visit, Maria asked to speak with him privately. In the hospital garden, I've made my decision, she said, her heart pounding. If you're really sure about this, then yes, we'll come with you. Joseph's face lit up with pure joy. You mean it? I mean it. But I have conditions. Name them. I want to contribute. Not looking for someone to take care of us. I want to be a partner. I'll find work, help with expenses, pull my own weight. Joseph nodded. The reservation clinic is always looking for nurses. With your experience, they'd probably hire you immediately. And if this doesn't work out, if we're not what you expected, I need to know that you'll be honest with me. I won't have my children getting attached to someone who might disappear. Joseph's expression grew serious. Maria, I can't promise that life will be perfect, but I can promise that I will never abandon your children. Even if something happened between us, they would always be welcome in my home. Maria studied his face and saw only sincerity. Okay then, when do we leave? As soon as Elena is cleared for travel, maybe next week. The news that they were leaving Cedar Ridge spread quickly through the town. Some people shook their heads and predicted disaster. Others seemed relieved that the problem family was becoming someone else's responsibility. But a few, like Mrs. Chun and Dr. Williams, wished them well. Mrs. Chun packed a box of Elena's baby clothes that other mothers had donated. You take care of those babies, she told Maria. And that man of yours, he's a good one. The morning they left was crisp and clear, with the kind of endless blue sky that made everything seem possible. Joseph had bought a car seat for Elena and helped Maria pack their few belongings into his truck. Everything they owned fit easily. In the back, Sofia clutched her silver bracelet and a small bag of jewelry-making supplies Joseph had given her. Miguel held his painted horsepot and a wooden flute Joseph had carved for him. Elena slept peacefully in her car seat, unaware that her whole life was about to change. As they drove out of Cedar Ridge, Maria looked back once at the small town that had been their home for 6 difficult months. She felt no sadness about leaving, only relief and cautious excitement about what lay ahead. The drive to the reservation took most of the day, winding through desert landscapes that seemed to stretch forever. Joseph pointed out landmarks along the way, ancient rock formations, hidden springs, places where his ancestors had lived and hunted. "Those mountains there," he said, gesturing toward distant peaks. "That's where I go when I need to think. There's a place up there where you can see for 100 miles in every direction. Can we go there sometime?" Sophia asked from the back seat. "Absolutely. But first you'll need to learn to ride a horse." Miguel practically bounced in his seat. "Really? We're really going to learn to ride horses? My neighbor has a gentle Murray that loves children. I think you two will get along perfectly." As the day wore on, Maria found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't for months. Joseph was an easy traveling companion, patient with the children's questions, considerate about stopping when Elena needed to eat, and entertaining them all with stories about reservation life. "My grandmother is going to want to meet you right away," he told Maria during one of their stops. "She's the unofficial matriarch of our family. Nothing happens without her approval." Maria felt a flutter of nervousness. "What if she doesn't?" "Like me? She will," Joseph said confidently. "She's always told me that the spirits would send me a family when I was ready to receive one. She probably claimed she knew you were coming all along." When Elena got fussy during the afternoon, Sophia sang to her in a sweet, clear voice that filled the truck with music. Miguel fell asleep with his head against the window, still clutching his wooden flute. Maria watched the desert roll by and tried to imagine what their new life would look like. As evening approached, they began seeing signs of the reservation: scattered houses, horses grazing in fenced pastures, children playing in yards that seemed impossibly large after the cramped spaces Maria was used to. "There," Joseph said, pointing ahead. "That's home." Maria saw a modest house set back from the road, surrounded by cottonwood trees and with mountains rising behind it. Smoke was coming from the chimney and warm light glowed in the windows. It looked like something from a dream, a real home where children could grow and play and feel safe. "It's beautiful," she whispered as Joseph parked the truck. The front door opened and an elderly woman stepped onto the porch. She was small and weathered, with gray hair and a long braid and eyes that seemed to see everything. "That's grandmother," Joseph said with obvious affection. "Her name is Rose, but everyone calls her grandmother." The old woman walked slowly toward the truck, her gaze taking in Maria and the children with careful attention. When Joseph introduced them, she nodded gravely at each child and then looked directly at Maria. "So you're the one," she said in accented English. "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied, not sure what else to say. Grandmother studied her for a long moment, then broke into a wide smile. "Good, it's about time. Now come inside, dinner is waiting and these children look hungry." As they gathered their things and walked toward the house, Maria felt Elena stir in her arms. The baby opened her dark eyes and looked around at her new world with the calm acceptance of someone who belonged exactly where she was. Maybe, Maria thought, this really was where they belonged. Maybe Joseph was right and they were all exactly where they were meant to be. The first morning in their new home, Maria woke up confused about where she was. Sunlight was streaming through actual curtains, not the harsh fluorescent light of the laundromat. Elena was sleeping peacefully in a real crib beside a real bed. Not on a mattress on the floor. She could hear voices from the kitchen. Joseph talking quietly with Sophia and Miguel as he made breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee and something delicious cooking drifted down the hallway. Maria had her own bedroom for the first time in over a year. It was simple but comfortable, with a wooden dresser, a rocking chair for nursing Elena, and windows that looked out on the mountains. Joseph had moved his things to the small guest room, giving her the master bedroom without question. "Good morning," he said when she appeared in the kitchen with Elena. "I hope we didn't wake you." No, Elena did that all by herself at 5:30. Maria said, settling into a chair at the wooden table. This is amazing, Joseph. I can't believe this is real. Sophia was sitting at the table, already dressed and eating pancakes. Joseph taught me how to flip them, she announced proudly. I only broke 2. Miguel was by the window, staring out at the horses in the distant pasture. When can we go see them? After breakfast, Joseph promised. But first we need to get everyone settled in. The house was bigger than Maria had imagined. 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen that opened into a living room with a stone fireplace, and even a small office where Joseph worked on his jewelry. Sophia and Miguel would share a room that was twice the size of the entire space they'd lived in at the laundromat. But it wasn't just the house that was different. Everything about life on the reservation felt foreign to Maria. The pace was slower, more connected to natural rhythms. People waved when they drove by, even if they didn't know you. Children played outside without their parents hovering nervously. It's going to take some getting used to, Joseph said gently, noticing Maria's overwhelmed expression. But there's no rush. We have all the time in the world. Grandmother Rose appeared at the back door just as they finished breakfast, carrying a basket of vegetables from her garden. She had lived next door for 60 years and seemed to know everything that happened in the community. The children look rested, she observed, studying Sophia and Miguel with sharp eyes. Good. Tomorrow I'll teach them to gather eggs from my chickens. Children should learn where their food comes from. Miguel's eyes went wide with excitement. Real chickens? 6 hens and 1 very proud rooster, Grandmother confirmed. They're good teachers of responsibility. Over the next few weeks, Maria watched her children transform in ways that amazed her. Sophia, who had been quiet and cautious in Cedar Ridge, began to bloom. She helped Grandmother in the garden, learned to braid cornhusk dolls, and made friends with the other children in the community. Miguel spent every available moment with the horses, learning to brush them and feed them treats. Joseph patiently taught him about animal care and respect, and soon Miguel was helping with basic stable work. He has natural instincts, Joseph told Maria one evening as they watched Miguel gently stroke the nose of Starlight. The gentle moray Joseph had mentioned. Some people are just born to understand animals. Maria found her own place in the community more slowly. At first, she felt like an outsider, the Mexican woman who didn't speak Apache, didn't know the customs, didn't understand the complex relationships that connected everyone. But when she started working at the reservation clinic, things began to change. Her nursing skills were desperately needed, and her gentle manner with patients won over even the most skeptical community members. You have healing hands, Dr. Yazzie, the elderly clinic director, told her after she successfully calmed a frightened child during a vaccination. That's a gift that transcends culture. The hardest adjustment was learning to live as part of a community instead of as an isolated family unit. In Cedar Ridge, Maria had been used to handling everything alone. Here, help came from unexpected directions and was offered freely. When Elena got a mild fever, 3 different neighbors brought traditional remedies. When Maria needed someone to watch the children while she worked late, there were always volunteers. When Sophia wanted to learn a traditional dance for a school performance, 2 teenage girls spent hours teaching her the steps. I don't understand how to repay all this kindness, Maria confessed to Joseph one evening as they sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. You don't repay it, Joseph explained. You pass it forward. When someone else needs help, you give it. That's how community works. Living with Joseph was easier than Maria had expected, but also more complicated. He was respectful of her space and never pressured her for more than friendship. But sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. And sometimes she found herself watching him play with the children and wondering what it would be like if their arrangement was based on love instead of practicality. The children, meanwhile, had no such complications. To them, Joseph was simply their dad now. Miguel started calling him Papa after just a month, and Sophia began asking if Joseph would teach her to make jewelry like his grandmother had taught him. You're really good at this, Maria told Joseph one evening after he had spent an hour helping Sophia with homework while simultaneously teaching Miguel to carve a simple whistle and keeping Elena entertained with silly faces. Good at what? Being a father. It comes so naturally to you. Joseph was quiet for a moment. I think about my son sometimes, wondering what he would have been like at Miguel's age. But instead of making me sad, it helps me appreciate what I have now, these children. They've given me a second chance at fatherhood. As autumn turned to winter, Maria realized that she was happier than she had been in years. The constant worry that had defined her life in Cedar Ridge was gone, replaced by a sense of security and belonging she had never experienced before. When Elena said her first word, "Papa," looking directly at Joseph, Maria felt tears of joy, instead of the jealousy she might have expected. Her daughter would grow up knowing she was wanted and loved by the man she called father, but the biggest change was in Maria herself. For the first time since Carlos left, she was sleeping through the night. She was laughing at Joseph's stories, singing while she cooked dinner, and making plans for the future instead of just surviving each day. "You look different," Grandmother observed one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen, preparing a traditional feast for the community harvest celebration. "Different how? Like you remember that you're a woman, not just a mother?" The old woman smiled knowingly. "That's good. Children need to see their parents as whole people." Maria felt her cheeks warm, but she couldn't deny the truth in Grandmother's words. Living with Joseph, being part of his family and community, had reminded her that she was more than just someone's mother or someone's abandoned wife. She was a person with her own dreams and desires, and for the first time in a long time, those dreams seemed achievable. 2 years had passed since that morning when Joseph first offered to change their lives. Maria stood in her garden, their garden, watching her family and marveling at how much everything had transformed. Miguel, now 6 years old, was helping Joseph repair a fence post. The little boy, who had once been too thin and too quiet, was now brown from the sun and confident in his movements. He chattered constantly about the horses, about school, about plans to build a treehouse when he got bigger. Sophia, 8 now, was teaching 2-year-old Elena how to braid grass into simple patterns. The shy girl who used to hide behind Maria's skirt had become a natural leader among the reservation children. She spoke 3 languages, English, Spanish, and enough Apache to get by, and her jewelry-making skills were already impressive enough that tourists bought her simpler pieces. Elena had just taken her first real steps the week before, toddling between Sophia and Joseph with the determined expression that seemed to be her permanent feature. She was a reservation baby through and through, equally comfortable with Grandmother's traditional lullabies and Maria's Spanish songs, and Joseph ... Maria watched him patiently show Miguel how to twist the wire properly, his movements sure and gentle. He had kept every promise he'd made that day in the hospital garden. He had been there for every fever, every scraped knee, every nightmare. He had never raised his voice in anger, never made the children feel like burdens, never treated them as anything less than his own blood. "Mama, look!" Elena called, holding up a crooked grass braid that was more knots than pattern. "Beautiful, Mia," Maria said. Crouching down to admire her youngest daughter's work, Elena beamed and toddled over to show Joseph, who praised her effort with the same enthusiasm he showed for Sophia's complex silver work. In Elena's world, she had always had a papa who thought everything she did was wonderful. The community harvest celebration was that evening, and their house would be full of neighbors and friends sharing food and stories. Maria had learned to make traditional fry bread that was almost as good as Grandmother's, and her pozole had become a requested dish at every gathering. "You're thinking very serious thoughts," Joseph observed, walking over after finishing with the fence. "Just remembering," Maria said. "Do you ever think about that day when you asked me to come with you?" Joseph smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way that made Maria's heart skip. "Every day. Best decision I ever made, even when Miguel broke your grandmother's pottery bowl? Even when Sophia painted Elena's face with clay? Even when Elena screamed for 3 hours straight with colic? Especially then," Joseph said firmly. "Perfect families don't need each other. Real families choose each other despite the chaos. As if summoned by their conversation, Miguel came running over, with dirt on his face and excitement in his voice. Papa, Sofia says you might ask Mama something special today. What does that mean? Joseph and Maria looked at each other, both remembering their conversation from the night before. They had talked until late, sitting on the porch steps while the children slept, finally acknowledging what had been growing between them for months. What had started as a practical arrangement had become something deeper. Maria found herself looking forward to Joseph's smile in the morning, missing him when he traveled to sell his work, and imagining what it would be like to wake up in his arms instead of in the room down the hall. Miguel, Sofia called sternly. From across the yard. Come help me with Elena, and stop being so nosy, Joseph laughed. Your daughter is very wise. She gets that from her father, Maria said without thinking, then felt her cheeks warm when she realized what she'd said. Joseph's expression grew serious. Is that what I am to them? Their father? You know you are. You've been their father. In every way that matters since the day Elena was born. And what am I to you? It was the question they had been dancing around for months. Maria looked at this man who had given her children stability, given her community, given her back her sense of self-worth. Somewhere along the way, gratitude had become respect, respect had become affection, and affection had become love. You're the man I want to spend the rest of my life with, she said quietly. Not because I need you to take care of us, but because I can't imagine being happy without you. Joseph stepped closer, reaching out to cup her face gently. Maria Santos, will you marry me? Not for practical reasons this time, but because I love you and I want to call you my wife. Before Maria could answer, Sofia came running over with Elena in her arms and Miguel close behind. Did he ask? Sofia demanded. Ask what? Elena said, not understanding but excited by the energy around her. Maria laughed, looking at her children's eager faces and Joseph's hopeful expression. 2 years ago, she had been a woman with no options and no hope. Now, she was surrounded by people who loved her, in a place where she belonged, with a future full of possibilities. Yes, she said, looking directly into Joseph's eyes. Yes, I'll marry you. The children erupted in cheers, with Sofia bouncing up and down and Miguel shouting, We're going to be a real family. Elena clapped her hands and babbled happily, not understanding the words but caught up in the excitement. Joseph kissed Maria gently, tasting salt from tears she didn't realize had started falling. Over his shoulder she could see grandmother, Rose watching from her kitchen window, nodding with satisfaction like she had known this moment was coming all along that evening. As the harvest celebration filled their house with laughter and music, Joseph stood to make an announcement. The room grew quiet as he spoke about family, about love, about how sometimes the spirits bring people together in unexpected ways. 2 years ago, I was a man with an empty house and an empty heart, he said, holding Maria's hand. Today, I'm surrounded by everything that makes life worth living. Tonight, I want to share our joy with all of you. Maria has agreed to be my wife. The room exploded in cheers and congratulations. Someone started drumming, and soon there was impromptu dancing. In the living room, Sofia and Miguel spun around together, laughing with pure happiness. Elena clapped along to the rhythm from her high chair, bits of fry bread stuck in her dark hair. Later, after the last guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Maria and Joseph sat on their front porch looking up at stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Any regrets? Joseph asked, his arm around her shoulders. Maria thought about the scared, desperate woman who had sat on church steps 2 years ago, wondering how she would feed her children. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, this house full of laughter, this community that felt like extended family. This man who loved her children as much as she did. Just one, she said finally. Joseph tensed. What's that? I regret that. It took us so long to admit we were in love. Joseph relaxed, pulling her closer. We had to grow into it. The best things can't be rushed. In the distance, a coyote howled, and Joseph smiled. Grandmother says that's good luck? The spirits are celebrating with us? Maria settled against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat. of his heart and listening to the peaceful sounds of her children sleeping safely inside their home. Tomorrow they would start planning a wedding that would blend their cultures and traditions. Tomorrow there would be new challenges and new joys, but tonight, she was exactly where she belonged. In the arms of a good man, surrounded by children who would never doubt they were wanted. In a place that had welcomed her as family. Sometimes, she thought drowsily, the best endings were really just the beginning of something even better. And sometimes the words of a stranger, "Come with me, your children deserve a father," could change everything.